Why can you leave a city 10 years ago and still remember exactly who you were when you lived there? You may forget the name of the street. You may forget which restaurant was on the corner. You might even forget the name of somebody you met there. But somehow, you remember who you were. And maybe that's because the places we tend to miss aren't always the places themselves. Sometimes we miss the person we were when we were there. Stories are everywhere. They're hidden in everyday conversations, restaurants, airport lounges, hotel lobbies, cities we visited once, and neighborhoods we haven't seen in 20 years. We simply have to learn how to notice them. I'm S.W. Baylis, romance author and storyteller, and welcome to the Texas Professional Romance. This is how to see stories in the world around you, where we explore the emotional meaning hidden inside stories, places, relationships, and everyday moments. Today, I want to talk about the places that refuse to leave us. Think about somewhere you've traveled. Not necessarily your favorite place. That distinction matters. I'm asking you to think about where you can still feel. Maybe it was Los Angeles, or even Miami, or that trip to Paris or London. Maybe it wasn't even a city. Maybe it was a restaurant you visited once, a hotel, your grandmother's kitchen, an airport where you said goodbye to somebody, or even that little coffee shop you haven't visited in years. Why that place? Or all the thousands of rooms you've entered? Why can't you still see that one? I don't think memory treats geography like a map. I think memory attaches itself to meaning. And once a place becomes connected to a particular version of you, that place becomes part of the story. Think about your first apartment. Maybe the furniture didn't match. Maybe you couldn't afford everything you wanted. Maybe you are eating dinner and it's the soda that you had that you bought at this little table, but you had your own meal, and maybe you couldn't afford everything you wanted. Maybe you ate dinner sitting on the sofa because you hadn't bought a dining room table yet, but you had your own key. And that key meant something. To you, it meant independence, possibility, maybe fear that you're on your own, maybe all three. Now, 10 years later, you could live in a beautiful home with everything you once dreamed about, and still feel something when you drive past that old apartment. Do you miss that apartment? Probably not. But you may remember the bad plumbing, Maybe you remember the woman standing in that apartment, trying to figure out who she was going to become. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a story. And then there are places connected to a before and an after. Maybe the bookstore where somebody proposed you share coffee, the hospital where your life changed, the airport where you left home, the university campus where you realized who you could become more than anyone expected, or even the restaurant where you finally admitted a relationship was over, the city where you fell in love, even the street you drove down the morning you decided to begin again. Nothing about those places has to look extraordinary. Somebody else can walk into that exact room and feel absolutely nothing. But for you, you're not seeing a room, you're seeing a chapter. And this is something romance stories understand particularly well. The strongest romantic settings aren't simply beautiful. They carry emotional meaning. Imagine two characters having dinner in a luxury restaurant. There's live music, white tablecloths, the atmosphere. But now imagine that restaurant is where they had their first date some years back. And tonight, they're sitting at that same table trying to decide whether their marriage can survive. Same restaurant, completely different story. And that's what places can do. It can hold the past and the present in the same room. And suddenly, the reader isn't simply asking, where are they? They're adding, what happened here? This is why I think traveling becomes more interesting when we stop treating places as checklists. We see the landmark, we take the photographs, we eat the meals, but also notice, what does this place sound like before everyone wakes up? What changes after dark? Where do people linger? Who seems comfortable here? Who doesn't? Why does the air smell like? What song is playing? What conversation is happening at the table beside you? And most importantly, how? How are you different while you're here? Because sometimes travel doesn't simply show us another place. It introduces us to another version of ourselves. Imagine a woman returns to Washington, D.C. for a conference. She hasn't lived there in 15 years. She has a different career now. She wears different clothes. She has different expectations. Maybe even a different last name. And then one evening, she has a few hours to herself. So she drives past that old restaurant she used to visit. She almost keeps driving, but she doesn't. She goes inside, and the restaurant has changed. There are new tables, There's different decoration. The menu has changed not only in the look on the outside, but the food. But then there's the server places a glass on the table and she hears a certain song. Suddenly, she's 28 again and she's remembering the man who used to sit across from her. Now, here's the interesting question. Does she miss him? Or does she miss who she was when she loved him? That is where the story begins. And maybe that's why certain places never leave us. They become containers for ambition, for heartbreak, for becoming, love, for the versions of ourselves we outgrew, and versions we occasionally wish we could visit again. Sometimes when we say, I miss that city, what we really mean is, I remember myself there. And those aren't quite the same things. If you love noticing the emotional architecture underneath romance, I am currently creating something just for you. It's called the Romance Tropes That Actually Work. It's a free guide exploring why certain romantic dynamics keep pulling us back and the emotional needs underneath them. And within the next few weeks, you'll be able to find the link to that guide in the description. But before we leave each other today, I want you to remember a place. Not your favorite place. The place you can still feel. Tell me in the comments, where is that place? And what version of you still lives there? You don't have to tell us the whole story. Just give us a city and one memory. Here at the Texas Professional Romance, we're learning to see the emotional architecture hidden inside stories, places, relationships, and ourselves. If that's the kind of conversation you've been looking for, subscribe and join us. And watch another episode of How to See Stories in the World Around You. Until next time, keep noticing. Every story begins with someone willing to see what others overlooked.